So the first question we could ask is psychology a science? And leaving the question of what is science aside for a second and just looking at what the phenomenon being studied would be, um, immediately I see two possibilities. We could study human behavior, or we could study the human psyche. So what's the difference? Human behavior reduces the human being to a biological organism, nothing but a body. Uh, Therefore, you can prescribe medication to cure the disease of mental illness, which is nothing but a chemical imbalance. You can statistically analyze the behavior of the person. And whenever we use statistics, we seem to be able to fit that field into science because it provides data which can be logically analyzed and deciphered. But I don't think we realize, though, there's always this cultural context around the way that the statistics are collected. What categories is the phenomenon of behavior being broken down into? What are we labeling disorders? What's allowed to take place in society, and what is maladaptive? What is a disorder? That's always a cultural projection to some extent. I think, for example, homosexuality was in the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Psychology, until like 1970 or something. Um, and I've talked about schizophrenia before. The way it's diagnosed is very reductionistically. I think there's a lot of reasons to see schizophrenia as almost a natural stage of development for extremely intelligent people who are able to perceive the patterns in a deeper way than others. And when they can see all the possibilities, well, the world turns into a pretty frightening place. And if they can't make it through that stage of development, if they are labeled dysfunctional and broken and locked away in an institution or given, huge doses of lithium or whatever, they're sort of being, their development is being arrested, and they are really being harmed by the science of psychology at that point. But on the other hand, if we're going to study the phenomenon of the human psyche, of our internal experience as individuals, then I don't know if we can call it a science anymore, because science is about finding general laws. And for sure, someone like Jung, for example, found general um, frameworks to understand the data that he got from his patients. But he always made sure to be clear that whenever you go into analysis, you're not looking to confirm your already established theories. You're there to help that person develop. And you're not supposed to get in the way of that because you are not them, psychologically speaking. But certainly, there are some types, I mean, what you, Gary, would probably call useful delusions, such as, spiritual ideas, at least an openness to God, to the idea that consciousness isn't just something that magically emerges on top of this biological thing as the logical intelligence and then dies as soon as the body is gone. The division that you make between your higher self and your lower self, which it's basically logic and emotion, or the intellect and the passions. There's got to be at some point a synthesis, and we can't, or at least I don't think it's useful to divide them in such a strict way, um, because that really does lead to the kind of fractured cognitive dissonance that you're experiencing. So in general, if you're seeing a therapist that's trying to get you to conform to the statistical norm, they're nothing more than some kind of industrialized priesthood that's taken over for the Catholic priests by coming up with some formula based on statistical observations, which are really the projection of materialist science onto human experience. Because if we just looked at human experience itself, the phenomenon of human experience, we could not reduce it so easily. We could not say, you have to fit into this box, you have to act this way, you have to have this kind of job, and you have to have this kind of family and live in this kind of neighborhood and do these kind of things for fun, and if you do anything outside of this, you are sick and you need to be brought back into a state of health. From the perspective of someone like Carl Jung, looking at your psyche, health is your own psychic wholeness. Now, if your form of psychic wholeness is being a murderous maniac, then that's a little different. But we have to make the assumption that there is no such thing as psychic wholeness as a murderous criminal. That's just not possible. That the basic nature of human beings is good, or that wholeness is always more compassion, more understanding, and not more aggression or more violence. And I think that that's not taking too big of a leap. So the psychologist's only job is to direct the individual toward their own expression of wholeness, of being connected, or at least able to relate to the various aspects of their experience, to see that they aren't in control all the time, because there is no controller. And I think, mainstream psychology is sort of under the impression that normal people don't have any control over themselves, which is why they need us, the psychologists with the degrees and the ability to prescribe medication to fix them, to give them control. And, implied in that is that we as the all-knowing psychologists have control. And there's a bit of hubris there, I think, because every individual is a psyche, and they have an unconscious, they have shadow projections, and if you are assuming some objective stance, some type of superiority over the patient as a psychologist, you're already harming their ability to form, to individualize themselves and to become whole. You're already neglecting the patient and causing more disease, I think.